Welcome to the podcast. This is episode 5, where we are discussing the Riot.
Yeah, this is like the culmination, right? Like,
yeah,
shit's about to go down.
Yeah, so 5 episodes in of the Christiana Riot series, and we are actually discussing the Christiana Riot. So sources for this episode is the book Bloody Dawn by Thomas P. Slaughter, just like every episode in the series. Also, A Freeman's Tale by William Parker from Atlantic Monthly in February of 1866. A article on YahooTV.com called Zoe Deschanel connects to the Underground Railroad on Who Do You Think You Are?
I might have to check that article out.
Yeah, so that's going to come. Zoe Deschanel is going to come up. FriendsJournal.org and LincolnConspirators.com, Freedom's Battle of Christiana. So I'm definitely clipping here a little bit. Let's turn this back. All right. So, episode 1, we talked about Noah Burley, John and George Hammond, Nelson Ford, and why and how these four men escaped from Retreat Farm in Baltimore County, Maryland. Episode 2 and 4, we talked about some background information on the Fugitive Slave Acts and abolitionism. And episode 3, we talked about the abolitionist William Parker, whose house the four men, or 3 of the 4 men, were hiding out in the days leading up to the Christiana Riot. So that's where we stand at this point. The 4 guys have escaped from Retreat Farm in 1849, and 2 years later in 1851, is that right? Yeah. They are living with William Parker in Christiana, Pennsylvania.
That's William Parker the badass.
Yes.
And there's some sort of nebulous network of Underground Railroad types that are like keeping tabs on like the slave catchers.
Yes, and they will play a large part in today's episode.
All right.
So 1851, the year that the riot takes place, was a bad year in northern Maryland and southern Pennsylvania in terms of agriculture. There was a very cold spring followed by a very hot, dry summer. And so crop yields were about 2/3 of what they were normally. And that kind of pissed everyone off and put everybody on edge. So the Gorsuch family was, sitting around their table, just getting increasingly more angry that the 4 men who escaped weren't there to share in the hardships of a down agricultural year. It just kind of made everybody a little bit more angry and on edge. They had received word that
wouldn't they have to like feed them?
Yeah, I think it was just a general like.
They're just grumpy assholes.
None of this makes financial sense at this point. This is like long past the point.
It's just like spite and resentment at this point.
Yes, at this point, it's purely just wounded pride and anger.
Okay.
If you remember from the I think it was in the William Parker episode, we talked about how William Paget, the weird little slave snitch man, had sent word that he thought that the 3 of the 4 men were living in Christiana, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gorsuchs had received that word, and they're sitting around angry about the 4 men not being there to share in the hardships. And so they get together across the street from Retreat Farm at a inn owned by their cousin, Captain John Gorsuch. This inn was the largest inn in Baltimore County and had the notable architectural feature of cages in the basement.
Yes.
For traveling slavers to put their human chattel overnight. So it was September 1851. Members of the Gorsuch family were sitting around the inn. They were all pissed off, talking about what they were going to do to bring back these escaped men who they now thought 2 years later were in Lancaster County. The informant William Paget had sent them a letter on August 28th, and he knew the Gorsuch and he recognized their slaves on sight, or so he claimed. And so they were pretty confident that this was a good tip.
And he was like, if you come to Christiana dressed as a clergyman,
sneak
through the woods.
The very specific instructions. Paget was, just to summarize, or to remind anybody who forgot, Paget was a semi-pro slave snitch.
Which is a dirty thing to be.
Yeah. He professionally was a clock repairman, which took him all over the county, and he used that time to look out for signs of escaped slaves and snitch on them. He'd walk the paths and roads, looking for sumac to dye things, as well as on his, clock repair route. And he was known for his talent of befriending the local black community to gain information. I guess he like had a certain charisma about him, and he could use that to betray people. Later, after all this, locals would remember him as a miserable creature.
I don't like this guy.
No, Paget wasn't well liked. Or at the time, I guess he was reasonably well liked, but he wasn't remembered fondly.
No, it seems like a scumbag.
Yeah. Paget was a member of the Gap gang in Gap, Pennsylvania. They were working class whites who terrorized the local black community and hung out at the Gap Tavern. There was also
what were they like? Was it kind of like a proto KKK type thing? They were just trying to sort of keep free black citizens in their place, kind of.
So it was a little bit of that. It was a lot of things. So it was a little bit of a proto KKK, a little bit of just terrorizing the local black community, just being assholes. It was a little bit of, wanting to find information on escaped slaves because that was profitable.
Right.
There was also a group of them, or a group operating in the same area, specifically in an abandoned nickel mine near Gap, that were operating as horse thieves.
What?
So
that's so theatrical.
Yes.
They were a gang of horse thieves in an abandoned nickel mine.
Yes. And this gang of, so it's hard to say, because there's not I don't think that there was an official roster for the Gap gang. I don't think you can, it wasn't like a Masonic organization where there was rules, and it was a loose affiliation of
sounds
scumbags.
Like something Tom Sawyer would have made up.
Yes. So, some of them were slave catchers. Some of them were, Paget, who was a semi-professional slave snitch. Some of them were, probably just guys who like to get drunk and say mean things about black people.
Out of work nickel miners.
Yeah. And some of them were these horse thieves that would meet at the abandoned nickel mine, and they would, in their, operation as horse thieves, they would also spy on newcomers and turn in fugitives for the bounty money. William Paget was considered to be the chief spy of the Gap Hill gang. And so it's just a little bit of, everything, just a general, there's just a general group of working class white people in Gap, Pennsylvania that just kind of sucked. And they served as adversaries to William Parker's abolitionist group.
That's disappointing. That's where I finally found my turkey thighs for sale.
Yes. So the Fugitive Slave Act had created a setting of suspicion, tension, hatred, and violence into which Gorsuch and his party blundered. Their limited knowledge of slave catching, with limited knowledge of slave catching, Edward Gorsuch and his son Dickinson, his cousin Joshua, and his nephew Dr. Thomas Pierce, as well as two neighbors, Nicholas Hutchings and Nathan Nelson, left the inn and headed north with the idea that they were going to capture these men in Christiana. Dickinson at the time tried and failed to talk his father out of it, pointing out that it didn't make any financial sense, and remarked on his stubbornness and refusal to measure his loss in any calculation other than his wounded pride. So Dickinson, throughout the whole thing, Dickinson is going along with it and helping with this attempt to capture these men, but he's constantly trying to talk his dad out of it.
I feel like there probably had to be an element too, because I was we were talking about, these haven't come out yet because I don't know if they're a secret.
Yeah.
But we recorded a couple of bonus episodes.
Yes.
And in one of them, we talked about how in the 19th century, there's just sometimes you have to remember that there just wasn't nearly as much entertaining shit to do back then.
Yeah.
And sometimes people did crazy stuff just because they were kind of bored.
Right.
And I have to imagine there's an element of that. This probably to some of those guys just seemed like it was a fun adventure.
Oh yeah, especially
we're gonna go chase down the fugitives.
Yeah, especially for the neighbors, Nicholas Hutchings and Nathan Nelson. I think for them it was probably
just
something to do.
Yeah.
For Dickinson Gorsuch, I think it was probably duty to his father.
Yeah.
He felt, he definitely thought it was a bad idea, and he expresses that repeatedly throughout their whole misadventure. But he went along with it the whole time, and I think it was probably because he felt obligated to stand by his father. On September 8th, 1851, Edward took a train to Philadelphia ahead of the rest of his party, and the next day, September 9th, he secured 4 warrants under the Fugitive Slave Law. Because of the way the new Fugitive Slave Law was set up, he was assigned a deputy fugitive slave marshal, a man named Henry H. Klein, to help head his posse and make sure everything was done legally. So Gorsuch and Klein were in Philly. They hired 2 Philadelphia cops to join them as deputies and paid them in advance. From there, the posse split up to seem less conspicuous. So Edward rode alone. Klein took a separate train and then rented a wagon. And the 2 cops by the name of John Agan and Thomas Tully took a later train. So they're all leaving Philly separately, hoping that they will get have the element of surprise when they arrive in Christiana. The rest of the party was still down in Baltimore. They received word that the warrants had been procured, and so they traveled north from Baltimore to meet the posse at a tavern in Lancaster. Klein, almost immediately, Klein's wagon broke down and he had to walk back to hire another. So because of that, Klein missed their first meetup and just kind of wandered around Lancaster looking for Gorsuch and claiming that telling people that he was looking for horse thieves and just generally acting suspiciously.
Okay.
People were commenting on it. People were like, what are you looking for? Who are you and what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm looking for horse thieves. And they didn't believe him. So unbeknownst to Gorsuch and Klein, their activities were being observed by a secret vigilance committee of Black abolitionists. This group was led by a man named William Still, and he had a series of men stationed around various fugitive slave offices with the aim of intercepting information about possible slave catchers and their activities. One of his agents was a man by the name of Samuel Williams, who learned that Gorsuch had been talking to Marshal Klein and began to shadow Klein to learn of their destination. Samuel Williams is a pretty badass dude. He made no effort to hide himself or his activities. He was just following Klein, like, I know what you're up to, and just like openly watching him, just making it known to Klein that he wasn't going to have the element of surprise. He was hoping that in doing so, he would scare them off their task.
He'd be like, look, we know what you're up to.
Yeah. So Samuel Williams was a Black member of the Underground Railroad and the owner of a Philadelphia tavern called the Boulevard House. He had knowledge of the warrants and was following Klein to warn the Black residents of the slave catching posse. From A Freeman's Tale, which was, like I said, was written by William Parker he wrote, Philadelphia on the 9th of September, 1851, when Mr. Gorsuch and his gang of Maryland kidnappers arrived there. Their presence was soon known to a little band of true men who were called the Special Secret Committee. The little band bent themselves to the task they were pledged to perform with zeal and devotion, and success attended their efforts. They knew that one false step would jeopardize their own liberty and very likely their lives, and utterly destroy every prospect of carrying out their objects. But by walking directly into their camp, watching their plans as they were developed, and secretly testing every inch of ground on which they trod, they discovered enough to counterplot these plotters, and to spring upon them a mine which shook the whole country, and to put an end to man-stealing in Pennsylvania forever. The trusty agent of the special committee, Mr. Samuel Williams of Philadelphia, a man true and faithful to his race and courageous to the highest degree, came to Christiana, traveling most of the way in the company of the very men whom Gorsuch had employed to drag into slavery. 4 as good men as ever trod the earth. These Philadelphia roughs, with their Maryland associates, little dreamed that the man who sat by their side carried with him their inglorious defeat and the death warrant for at least one of their party. Williams listened to their conversation and marked well their faces, and being fully satisfied by their awkward movements, he knew they were heavily armed, managed to slip off one of the cars in the village of Downingtown unobserved and proceeded to Penningtonville, where he encountered Klein at a tavern, who had started several hours in advance of the others.
Sorry. I live in the village of Downingtown. Yes. That's nice.
Yeah, so
he's just on the train with them?
Yeah.
Like just sitting next to them?
Yes. Just watching them. And he observed them close enough to know that they probably were heavily armed and decided, okay, I know where they're going. I know that they have guns. It's time for me to jump off the train and go and let William Parker know.
So he just jumps off at Downingtown.
Yeah. And then he proceeds to Penningtonville, which is near Ackland, Pennsylvania. Okay. and then encounters Klein at a tavern in Penningtonville. Klein knew Williams and knew what he was doing. Obviously, like Williams wasn't making any secret of it. And Klein continued to pretend to be looking for horse thieves. So Williams called out Klein. He said, "I know what kind of horse thieves you are after. They are all gone and you better not go after them." Klein fled in his wagon and Williams proceeded on to Christiana. After their confrontation at the tavern, Williams left Klein behind and headed to Christiana, where he began to spread word that the kidnappers were in the area. One account describes Klein as drunkenly calling attention to himself in the tavern. That's only one account I found. So maybe Klein was drinking. Maybe he was drunk in the tavern, or maybe, Williams just confronted him there and he didn't need to. It's one of those things, like, I don't think he needed to call attention to himself. Williams knew what he was doing. Right. But there are accounts that, like, he gave himself away through his, like, drunken buffoonery, which is a possibility.
He's like, nope, not looking for fugitive slaves, not me.
So another interesting note in A Freeman's Tale, again, which was published in 1866, Parker talks about the information about Gorsuch's designs being obtained in a secret way. And he does speak about Williams, and he speaks open, in 1866, he writes about Samuel Williams, and I just read that whole passage. Mm-hmm. But even then, 16 years later, when he's writing about this, he won't go into specifics about how the secret special committee operated and how they knew exactly what was going on. So it's just, kind of crazy to think that even that long later, even with the Civil War and everything having already occurred, like, he still felt the need to keep their methods of operation a secret.
Well, did they remain active after the? Because
I don't know.
Because it's not like the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and then everything was awesome for black people.
No, like people like the Gap Gang would still exist. They would still have to worry about.
Yeah, there were plenty of the KKK sprung up in the South, but all throughout the North there were white fellowship societies and stuff like that. Doing essentially the same thing. Yeah. So it seems there was still a need for some sort of vigilance committee, trying to keep an eye on folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe Williams was still active.
Yeah.
He was an active agent.
Well, I think I just thought it was important to point out that when William Parker writes about Samuel Williams, so many Williams in this story, when he does so, he's kind of doing so with Samuel Williams' permission. Mm-hmm. He doesn't talk about the committee as a whole. He doesn't talk about the committee's method as a whole. He makes sure that remains a secret.
Right.
And so it's to Samuel Williams' credit that he is so bold, as even he's following them out in the open. He's not trying to hide his activities. He's willing to face these guys head on. Mm-hmm. And, it's something that even 16 years later, William Parker is respecting in his writings, where mm-hmm. he's talking about Samuel Williams, but he's not talking about the committee and how the committee operates. He wrote, Williams was subsequently arrested and thrown into the cold cells of a lonesome jail for this good act of simple Christian duty. But resolute to the last, he publicly stated that he had been at Christiana, and to use his own words, "I done it and will do it again." While Williams and the others arrested for the riot were in jail, the special committee supplied them with clothes, lawyers, and whatever else they needed while taking care of their families. So I done it and I would do it again. So, Williams is just one of the other, another person in this story that's just kind of a badass.
Yeah.
So the next morning, Klein, after his confrontation in the tavern with Samuel Williams, Klein found the two Philly cops, Agent and Tully, asleep in a bar room in Parksburg.
Okay.
The two cops quit on the spot and went back to Philadelphia, knowing that Williams had exposed their operation. The two officers...
so they found out they were exposed, and then they dragged themselves to sleep, and
yes,
and then just bailed,
and then just quit.
Okay.
So the two officers had joined the group, no longer felt that they had the element of surprise on their side, and they took a train back to Philadelphia, they made arrangements to take a train back to Philadelphia. Gorsuch tried to persuade them to stay with the posse and even offered them more money to do so. The two officers took Gorsuch's money and stated that they would return that night and bring reinforcements with them. They do not do that.
Oh, okay.
So he paid them in advance as well. So he paid them in advance.
So they double took his money.
Yeah.
And just bailed.
On him. He paid them in advance. They traveled from Philadelphia to Parkersburg, got drunk, fell asleep in a bar, woke up, were like, this whole operation is blown, quit, accepted his money.
So they defrauded him.
Yeah.
I feel like no matter whose side you're on, these are bad cops.
Yes, but so they're just like, yeah, they're happy to take Gorsuch's money, but they know that this is a failed operation. Klein finally met up with the Gorsuches in Salisbury, Pennsylvania, and about 11 p.m. the arrested group boarded a train to cover the final few stretches to Gap, which is, we keep talking about the geography of this. If people don't know, Gap is just a few miles north of Christiana. So they all meet up in Salisbury, the group from Baltimore, the group from Philly, and then they head to Gap, which is a few miles north of Christiana.
It's weird because I live in like have lived in sort of like a, suburban, like semi-rural setting, like most of my life, which is, travel is dominated by cars.
Yeah.
I guess if you live in like a city with a mass transit system, it feels different to you, but it's weird to me that they're all taking trains such short distances.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Salisbury to Gap, like, that's a decent distance.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't want to walk it.
No. No, but I don't know. You get a wagon. I don't know. I don't know. To me, like, you get on a train to like go to Boston or something.
Yeah. So Gorsuch expressed his frustration with Klein for missing their initial meetup, the one that he missed because his wagon broke down. For some reason, Klein felt compelled to lie and say that his wagon broke because he was speeding away from Samuel Williams. That's not the case. His wagon broke before he encountered Samuel Williams. He encountered him on the train.
He just wanted it to be a badass chase story.
I don't know. For some reason, he just, I guess, didn't think that telling him that the wagon broke and he had to walk back was a good enough excuse because Gorsuch was all pissed off at him. So he claimed that he was fleeing from Samuel Williams and his wagon broke. Gorsuch sent Klein again to try to convince the cops to come back, and they again refused. Like they're done. And so at 1 a.m. on September 11th, an unknown guide who was possibly William Paget led the posse on foot from Gap to Christiana. They first came upon a house that the guide informed them had one of the fugitives living in it. Gorsuch thought that it would be a good idea to split the group in half, and some staying there to capture the one runaway who was living in that house while the rest moved on to William Parker's house. Klein disagreed and believed that they would require all the men to retake the fugitives at Parker's house. In the end, Gorsuch decided to leave the house, that first house for now, and go focus on Parker's house where two of the three men were living. Gorsuch thought that the man in the first house, I don't know why he thought this, but he thought that it was one guy in particular whose wife was still enslaved by him.
Okay.
And so he thought that after they captured the first two, he could probably convince him to come back to be with his wife. So he's like, all right, let's just go and we'll focus on the other two. The guide then led them another 6 to 8 miles. They halted briefly to eat some crackers and cheese and primed their weapons while discussing their plan of attack. So they're having a little snack break.
A little snack and gun break.
Yeah, a little snack break, a little load their guns. A short time later, Pierce, the doctor, Gorsuch's nephew, stopped to take a drink out of a creek, and a nervous Klein told him that they couldn't stop because the sun was coming up and they no longer had the cover of darkness. So Klein is getting tense. The guide led them to a rented house where the fugitives lived, and then he left. This guide, whoever it was, had delivered them.
Is it the guy that may or may not be Paget?
It may or may not be Paget.
Okay.
So most people assume it's Paget because it seems like the kind of thing Paget would do.
And he was wearing an outlandish costume.
Yes. There are some people who think that it might not have been Paget, that it might have actually been somebody working with William Parker. Because
it didn't go well?
Well, because they kind of viewed it as like delivering them on a platter into the heart of Lancaster's anti-slavery movement.
Okay.
And there are people who think that the guide knowingly led them into a trap.
He was like, this is what we want to do. We want to sneak into this area where all of the armed black people live.
Yes. And they know you're coming.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more likely that it was Paget. That just makes
it just didn't go well.
Yeah. But there are people who will think that it was like a trap, that it was like set up as that it was a setup all along. So the way the house was situated, there was a long lane out front that people mostly referred to as the long lane, and then a shorter lane that led up to the two-story stone house. The house had 2 windows on the second floor and 2 more on either side of the door. To the left of the house was an orchard and a creek. To the right was a cornfield, which in September, still had high stalks in it. So it was a pretty like penned in area.
Yeah.
The Parkers were joined in their home by, it was William Parker's wife Eliza, and they were joined in their home by Eliza's sister Hannah, her husband Alexander Pinkney, and also a fellow runaway from Maryland by the name of Abraham Johnson, as well as the 2 men who had escaped from Retreat Farm. About a mile down the house, about a mile and a half down the long lane from their house, lived a couple of pacifist Quakers, Levi and Sarah Powell. They were the Parkers' landlords and Zooey Deschanel's ancestors.
Oh, so that's how Zooey Deschanel comes.
That's where Zooey Deschanel. Yes, the William Parker's landlords were Zooey Deschanel's ancestors.
Oh, all right.
They did one of those like celebrity genealogy shows, and they found that out when they were searching for.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
Usually they're just like, your family owned slaves.
Well, so Sarah Parker was actually a noted abolitionist. This wasn't like the only thing that she did. She like wrote about abolition. She was involved in like local abolition societies. She was like so
Zooey Deschanel wins that show. It's not like who was it? I think it was Ben Affleck, where they did one of their shows and like they found like a bunch of cruel slave masters in his family, and he like paid them to like not air that.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe
it was shady.
They found out that Don Cheadle's ancestors owned slaves.
Yeah.
That happened on that show. He did not like that. he didn't care for that.
Did you ever see the Larry David one?
No.
It was funny. They found out that Larry David had an ancestor who owned slaves and fought for the Confederacy.
Yeah.
He was like, you did it. You did it. Sorry, I'm probably
no, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah. But yes, Sarah Powell though, she was a noted abolitionist. So Zooey Deschanel had like a hero in her ancestry.
That's fun.
Yeah. Sarah, like I said, she was also a pacifist. So when she had heard of the approaching violence, she went to the Parker's house to meet with William before the battle and tried to convince him and his friends that forceful resistance was a bad idea. She said, "I wish thee would consider whether or not it'd be better to escape to Canada rather than lead the colored people to resist by force of arms." She tried, she was like, "Just run away to Canada. Don't fight." They did not listen to her.
Yeah. Pacifists they got to do what they got to make their pitch.
Yep. According to R.C. Smedley's History of the Underground Railroad in Chester and the neighboring counties of Pennsylvania, published in 1883, William Parker replied, "If the laws protect us colored men as they do the white men, I would be a non-resistant and not fight, but appeal to the laws. But the laws of personal protection are not made for us, and we are not bound to obey them. If a fight occurs, I want the whites to stay away. They have a country and may obey the laws, but we have no country."
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah. William Parker had a way with words. I like his quotes a lot. Basically, like nowhere in southeastern Pennsylvania could this posse be in more danger than they are in William Parker's doorstep. As we established in the William Parker episode, he is a badass and not afraid of really anything, it seems. But also, like I described, the setting of the house, it's an ideal one for seclusion. It's situated, near a quarter of a mile from the nearest public highway. It stands well up on the hill, surrounded by trees
and like late summer corn on the other side.
Yeah, it is almost invisible to the outside world, yet in such a position that a resident could scan the countryside and see anybody coming from like a long distance away. It's an ideal spot to defend against this kind of group.
Sniper towers.
Yeah, like it's not gonna go well for the Gorsuches. Inside the house, they had heard Samuel Williams's warning, and they were preparing for a fight. Again, from A Freeman's Tale. The information brought by Mr. Williams spread through the vicinity like a fire in the prairies. And when I went home from my work that evening, I found Pickney, who I should have said before was my brother-in-law, Abraham Johnson, Samuel Thompson, and Joshua Kite at my house. Samuel Thompson and Joshua Kite are two of the escaped slaves. Like I've said in an earlier episode, they changed their names a lot, and I don't even really know who is who at this point.
Yeah, they're on the run. It's hard to keep track. Yeah. They were doing a good job. They're throwing off pursuit.
Yes, but so he continues. All of them excited about the rumor. I laughed at them and said it was all talk. It was the 10th of September, 1851. They stopped for the night with us, and we went to bed as usual. So, he's kind of saying like, I laughed it off. It was nothing. This is William Parker. It was, we went to bed like it was just rumor, and we went to bed like usual. Frederick Douglass later interviewed a lot of people involved in this case, and many of them described it as a sleepless night. Mm-hmm. So that could be a case where
there's some braggadocious talk.
Yeah, that might not be the case, but that's the way that William Parker recorded it. As the sun rose, the posse entered the short lane to the house and encountered Nelson Ford, also, AKA John Beard, AKA Joshua Kite. Parker later claimed that Ford was heading home and didn't expect the posse to actually show up. But this is contradicted by the later interviews conducted by Frederick Douglass. How long Nelson Ford and Joshua Hammond had been staying with Parker and his extended family is not known for certainty. One account is that they had fled to Parker's only days before out of concern for the rumors of slave catchers. Other accounts make it appear that one or both of them had been living with the family for some time. Regardless, when the Parker household ran upstairs, they numbered the same as the slave catching group. In the house, there was William Parker, his wife Eliza, Hannah Pickney, her husband Alexander, Abraham Johnson, Nelson Ford, and Joshua Hammond. Ford was likely acting as a lookout. Like I said, Parker later claimed that Parker just really wanted to kind of portray this whole thing as it was like a chance encounter. And, the Ford was just heading home and ran into them on the lane. Mm-hmm. Other accounts make it sound like Ford was probably acting as a lookout, going out to like see if Gorsuch was on the property. And he was fast. The slavers went after him. He ran away. They didn't get anywhere close to catching him. And he ran in the house yelling, "Oh, William, kidnappers, kidnappers." The 5 men and 2 women in the house gathered their weapons. They went up to the second story and looked down on the 6 men outside. In order to capture the men, the posse would need to ascend a narrow staircase one at a time. The slave catchers had no clear line of fire, while Parker and his friends and family had them in their sights. So they're not in a good position. The posse's plan was to have 4 of the members stake out the corners of the house to prevent escape, while Klein and Edwards would confront the occupants directly and present them with the warrants, explain the law, and take custody of the 2 fugitives that were inside. Klein called on the owner of the house, and Parker appeared at the landing asking, "Who are you?" Klein identified himself, and Parker told him, "Take one more step and I'll break your neck."
So their plan was to just like present paperwork.
Yes.
And be like, "Look, you're not like free people. Like, you have to come with us. And like, you escaped. Like, something bad's probably going to happen to you."
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a good pitch.
No, it's not. And we'll see it. Like, that's how it's going to play out. They're going to try to present their paperwork, and Parker doesn't care about their paperwork. So, so he told him, "Take one more step and I'll break your neck." Parker later recalled that when Klein stated that he had the proper warrants, he told Klein, "I don't care for him nor the United States." Again, from the Freeman's Tale. Joshua ran upstairs and they followed him. But I met them at the landing and asked, "Who are you?" The leader, Klein, replied, "I am a United States Marshal." I told him to take another step and I'll break your neck. He again said, "I am a United States Marshal." I told him I do not care for him nor the United States. And at that he turned and went down the stairs. Pickney said, as he turned to go down, What is the use in fighting? They will take us." Klein heard him and said, "Yes, give up, for we can and will take you anyhow." I told them not to be afraid, nor give up to any slaveholder, but to fight until death. "Yes," said Klein. I have heard many a Negro talk as big as you, and I have taken them all, and I'll take you. You have not taken me yet, I replied. And if you undertake it, you will have your name recorded in history for this day's work. Eliza Parker, again, like I've said in the past episode, Eliza was a badass herself, grabbed a corn cutter and proclaimed that she would cut the head off the first person in the group to give up.
All right.
Yeah, so Eliza's not fucking around either. Eliza was a fugitive from Maryland. I think we talked about her escape in a past episode. She was married to William, and they had 3 kids.
She's the one that garroted the traitorous wagon driver? Okay.
Yes. So her and William had 3 kids. Her mother, brothers, and sister were also fugitives, all living in the Lancaster area. So for her, they were fighting for themselves and their families, as well as for the fugitives from Gorsuch's farm. Like they, everyone she loved had a stake in this. She had said, in this war against slavery, there are no black non-combatants. From a Freeman's Tale, Mr. Gorsuch then spoke and said, "Come, Mr. Klein, let's go upstairs and take them. We can take them. Come, follow me. I'll go up and get my property. What's in the way? The law is in my favor and the people are in my favor." At that, he began to ascend their stairs, and I said to him, "See here, old man, you can come up, but you can't go down again. Once up here, you are mine." Klein then said, "Stop, Mr. Gorsuch. I will read the warrant, and then I think they will give up." He then read the warrant and said, "Now you see, we are commanded to take you, dead or alive. So you may as well give up at once." Yeah, really. You can come up, but you won't go back down again.
And I just like no, look, this is legit.
Yeah.
We have paperwork. You don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Klein read the official document 3 times to the sound of guns being loaded in the house. Klein and Gorsuch began to climb the stairs. On their way up, Gorsuch yelled to Nelson that if he returned, he would be treated just as well as before, and that he would not leave without his property. At that, someone threw a 5-pronged fish gig at the slave catchers.
like a spear?
Yeah, I mean it's like a spear, like a 5-pronged spear.
It's like a trident.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody threw a trident at the slave catchers, who retreated back outside. Klein threatened to burn down.
They're throwing tridents in there now.
So they chased him back down the stairs with a trident. Klein threatened to burn down the house and pretended to send a message back to Lancaster for another 100 men. That had no effect. Gorsuch again offered a return to the mild slavery and got no response, and lost his temper and then threatened a return to harsh slavery.
Oh.
So Dickinson Gorsuch, Edward's son, saw the situation deteriorating and that violence was on the horizon, and attempted to persuade his father to leave. Edward Gorsuch demanded that his property be turned over to him, and William Parker suggested that the slaver look into the house and barn for tables and chairs or farm stock that belonged to him. This angered Edward Gorsuch, and he became even angrier when William Parker's wife sounded an alarm with horn blasts from the upstairs window. So again, from the Freeman's Tale, "My wife came to me and asked if she should blow the horn to bring friends of ours for assistance. I assented, and she went to the garret for this purpose. When the horn sounded from the garret window, one of the ruffians asked what it meant, and Klein said to me, 'What do you mean by blowing that horn?' I did not answer. It was a custom for us, when a horn was blown at an unusual hour, to proceed to the spot promptly to see what was the matter. Klein ordered his men to shoot at anyone he saw blowing a horn. There was a peach tree at the end of the house. Up it 2 of the men climbed, and when my wife went for a second time to the window, they fired as soon as they heard the blast, but missed their aim. My wife went down to her knees, but drew her head and body below the range of the window, the horn resting on the sill. She blew blast after blast, while shots poured thick and fast around her. They must have fired 10 or 12 times. The house was of stone, and the windows were deep, which alone preserved her life." So yeah, she's blowing this horn.
That's badass.
Yeah.
She's just blowing a horn out the window while people are shooting, unloading on her.
Yeah. Eliza blowing this tin horn had echoed throughout the countryside, and the local black community was on high alert already from Samuel Williams's warnings, so they answered the call quicker than usual. Like Eliza Parker, many of them were carrying corn knives. Others had clubs and axes, and a few had guns. Inside the house, a metal projectile was thrown from the upstairs and caught Dr. Pierce right above the eye, and Pierce shot back. A piece of wood struck Joshua Gorsuch in the shoulder. from A Freeman's Tale. I seized a gun and aimed it at Gorsuch's breath, for he evidently had incited Klein to fire, but Pinckney caught me in the arm and said, "Don't shoot." The gun went off, just grazing Gorsuch's shoulder. Another conversation then ensued between Gorsuch, Klein, and myself, when another one of the party fired at me, but missed. Dickinson Gorsuch, I then saw, was preparing to shoot, and I told him if he missed, I would show him where the shooting first came from. I asked them to consider what they were doing, or what they would have done had they been in our position. I know you want to kill us, I said, for you have shot at us time and time again. We have only fired twice, although we have guns and ammunition and could kill you all if we would, but we do not want to shed blood. If you do not want to shoot anymore, then, said Klein, I will stop my men from firing. They then ceased for a time. This was about sunrise. Dickinson and Klein argued for retreat and reinforcements, to which Gorsuch responded, "It's my property. I will have it, or I'll breakfast in hell." It's getting tenser.
Yeah.
From A Freeman's Tale, he then started up the stairs and came far enough to see us plainly. We were just about to fire upon him when Dickinson Gorsuch, who was standing on the old oven before the door, could see into the upstairs through the window, jumped down and caught his father, saying, "Oh, father, do come down now. They have guns, swords, and all kinds of weapons. They'll kill you. Do come down." The old man turned and left. When down with him, the young Gorsuch could scarce draw breath, and the father looked more like a dead than a living man. So frightened were they of the supposed danger. The old man stood for some time without saying anything. At last he said, as if soliloquizing, "I want my property, and I will have it." Dickinson argued that they could afford to hire more men, and that this was all exceeding the value of the slaves. But Gorsuch
he's in too deep.
He's in too deep. The people in the house asked for more time to consider their surrender, but in reality, they were just stalling for the friends who had been summoned by the horn. Noah Bewley, another of Gorsuch's escaped men, rode up on the horse. He was the man from the first house that they walked past. Let's see. Yeah, so he could have taken the moment to flee, but decided to come to the defense of Parker and his fellow runaways. He rode up on a horse, fastened it to the lane, loaded his gun, and watched. So he's now standing on the perimeter. The local black community began arriving through the fields with guns, corn cutters, scythes, rocks, clubs, other tools, as well as Parker's closest neighbor, a white miller named Castor Hanway. He was among the first to arrive. Castor was born in Delaware, then moved to PA as a kid, and then later to Maryland, and then back to Pennsylvania, and had only been in Christiana for a few months. There's nothing remarkable about Castor. His political beliefs are unknown, other than he was just Parker's closest neighbor, so he was one of the first people there. Elijah Lewis, another local white guy, who was the postmaster and a storekeeper, had informed Hanway that Parker's house was surrounded by kidnappers. And so together they went to Parker's home. Hanway carried no weapons, and his intentions were unknown. A local black farmer by the name of Isaiah Clarkson had retrieved Lewis that morning, mistakenly telling him that the kidnappers were there for Parker and that they must go see that justice was done. On their way, Lewis recruited more supporters for the fugitives, including Kastner, Hanway, saying that William Parker's house is being surrounded by kidnappers, and that they had to hurry to get there. In about a half an hour, 75 to 150 black people had arrived, and about 50 of them had guns. The slave catchers, being slave catchers, viewed the white men, Hanway and Lewis, as the leaders of the black people. Okay. So Klein produced his papers and asked Lewis and Hanway to assist them in the arrest, and Hanway told them that he wanted nothing to do with it. Henry Klein, seeing the whites in the group, Henry Klein, then he pointed out that the fugitive slave law passed by Congress the year before permitted him to forcibly deputize anyone to help, and or under penalty of treason. And the two white guys refused to help, saying that the blacks had a right to defend themselves. At the same time, they called out to the black people in the cornfield to keep their distance. So, Hanway and Lewis they're refusing to help. They're violating the new Fugitive Slave Act. But they are also telling other the assembled group that they shouldn't fire, that they shouldn't, kill this group of slavers. Hanway advised, Hanway and Lewis advised the marshal to leave or blood would be shed. They said, "You had better go home. You need not come here and make arrests. You cannot do it." From A Freeman's Tale again, Lewis and Hanway both said to the marshal, "If Parker says they will not give up, you better let them alone, for he will kill some of you. We are not going to risk our lives." And they turned to go away.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is like, even if like they were like, on the slave taker's side, like, what are they going to do? They're like, "No, you're on our team. This paper says you have to do what we say." That it's still like two more like white guys against like the 75 people that showed up.
Yes,
with like guns and machetes.
Yes. So at this, Klein shouted to the posse that it was time to withdraw, and he singled out Hanway and told him that he would be held responsible for Gorsuch's lost property. They write, like, in history, it's kind of recorded as they don't really know why Castor Hanway got singled out as the responsible party, the one that was going to be held like legally, legally responsible for not helping capture these men. There are some accounts where Hanway was on a horse, where a lot of the other men were on foot.
Mm-hmm.
And the only real reason that Hanway was on a horse was because he was sick. So he just didn't
too far to walk.
He just didn't feel like up for the walk. But they see a white guy on a horse surrounded by a bunch of black people, and so they just assume that he's like their general,
right?
So
they're like corporal.
Yeah. So they tell him that he's going to be the one held responsible, financially responsible for this loss. Elijah Lewis and Castor Hanway began riding down the lane, heading away from their home, and Marshal Klein followed them, begging for them to try harder to disperse the group that was surrounding the posse. They did tell the group, "Don't shoot, for the sake of God, don't shoot." But Klein was like, "Hey, come on, they seem like they're listening to you. Can you don't leave? Please try a little harder to keep them from killing all of us." As members of the posse began to retreat, Gorsuch made his way closer to Parker's house. Everyone was growing more tense and angry. Parker and the men in the house, including the Gorsuch's runaways, had exited the house and stood together kind of in the front yard. Edward Gorsuch was seething over at this occurring. No longer the men who had escaped him were no longer like hiding. They were now standing in the open, facing him like man to man, and that just drove him fucking crazy. Like he just totally lost his mind at this point. So again, from A Freeman's Tale. While they were talking, I came down and stood in the doorway, my men following behind me. Mr. Gorsuch said, "You can't come out here." "Why?" I said. "This is my place. I pay rent for it. I'll let you see if I can't come out." "I don't care if you do pay rent for it," he said. "If you come out, I will give you the contents of these," presenting at the same time 2 revolvers, one in each hand. I said, "Old man, if you don't go away, I'll break your neck," and then walked up to where he stood, his arms resting on the gate, trembling as if afflicted with palsy, and laid my hand on his shoulder, saying, "I have seen pistols before today." Klein now came running up and entreated Gorsuch to come away. "No," said the latter. "I will have my property or go to hell." "What do you intend to do?" said Klein to me. "I intend to fight," I said. "I intend to try your strength." "If you will withdraw your men," he replied, "I will withdraw mine." I told him it was too late. "You would not withdraw when you had your chance. You shall not now." When I was talking to Gorsuch, his son said, "Father, will you take all of this from an N-word?" I answered him by saying that I respected old age, but that if he would repeat that, I would knock his teeth down his throat. At this, he fired upon me. I ran up and knocked the pistol out of his hand, and he let the other one fall and ran into the field. My brother-in-law, who was standing near, then said, "I can stop him." And with his double-barreled gun, he fired. Young Gorsuch fell, but rose again. It rose and ran on again. Pickney fired a second time, and Gorsuch fell, and was soon up again, running through the cornfield. Lay down in the fence corner. I returned to my men and found Samuel Thompson talking to old Mr. Gorsuch, his master. They were both very angry. "Oh man, you had better go home. Old man, you had better go home to Maryland," said Samuel. "You had better give up and come home with me," said the old man. Thomas took Pickney's gun from him, struck Gorsuch, and brought him to his knees. Gorsuch rose and signaled to his men. Thompson then knocked him down again, and he again rose. At this time, all the white men opened fire, and we rushed upon them. We all, when they turned, threw down their guns and ran away. We became closely engaged, clubbing our rifles. We were too closely pressed to fire. We found a good deal could be done with empty guns. Old Mr. Gorsuch was the bravest of the party. He held onto his pistols until the last, when all others threw away their weapons. I saw as many as three at a time fighting with him. Sometimes he was on his knees, then on his back, and again he would be on his feet, and again his head. He was a fine soldier and a brave man. Whenever he saw the least opportunity, he would take aim. While at close quarters with the whites, we could load and fire but 2 or 3 times. Our guns got bent and out of order, so damaged they became, and we could not shoot but 2 or 3 of them. Samuel Thompson bent his gun on Mr. Gorsuch so badly that it was of no use to us. Yeah, it's getting bad. It's getting tight, rough. Samuel Thompson said to Mr. Gorsuch, "Old man, you better go home to Maryland." Gorsuch responded, "You had better give up and come with me." Thompson struck Gorsuch in the side of the head with a pistol, knocking him to his knees. Gorsuch tried to rise and was struck again and was struck again. Thompson shot him once, and several others shot him more times, and the others struck him in the head with corn cutters, emulating scalping. So, yeah, Gorsuch is done.
Yeah.
Got shot a whole bunch of times and then hit with a bunch of corn cutters. Dickinson Gorsuch rushed to his father's side. Someone knocked the gun from his hand with a club, and Parker's brother-in-law shot him with a shotgun. The doctor later removed 70 shot from his right side. Dickinson was taken to the landlord Levi and Sarah Powell's house. No one who saw Dickinson in the days after the battle thought that he would survive, and he was bedridden for 3 weeks. Dr. Hanway and Lewis left when the shooting started. Dr. Pierce was shot several times while fleeing. Joshua Gorsuch was struck and clubbed several times to chance of kill him. When the white men ran, they scattered. I ran after Nathan Nelson, but could not catch him. I never saw a man run faster. Returning, I saw Joshua Gorsuch coming and Pinckney behind him. I struck him a blow in the side of his head, which stopped him. Pinckney came up behind, gave him such a blow which brought him to the ground. As the others passed, they gave him a kick or jumped upon him until blood oozed out of his ears. Hanway used his horse to shield Pierce until someone yelled at him to get out of the way, and he rode off, leaving Joshua and Pierce alone. Yeah.
He tried.
Yeah, he tried. Again, from A Freeman's Tale. One of our men ran after Dr. Pierce, as he richly deserved attention, but Pierce caught up with Castor Hanway, who rode between the fugitive and the doctor, to shield him and some others. Hanway was told to get out of the way, or he would forfeit his life. He went aside quickly, and my men fired at the Marylander, but missed him. He was too far off. I do not know whether he was wounded or not, but I do know that if it had not been for Hanway, he would have been killed. At this, Pierce ran off, leaving Joshua alone. Later, Parker said that the reason they didn't kill more of the posse was that their guns were bent from beating them with them. Joshua and Klein met up and walked away, but could not find anyone willing to help them in the surrounding area. They eventually made it to the next village where they could get on a train, or where Joshua got on a train, and Joshua would suffer from headaches for years to come.
From all the pistol whipping.
Yes. Old Mr. From A Freeman's Tale. Old Mr. Gorsuch was laying on the yard in a pool of blood, and confusion reigned from both inside and outside the house. Levi Powell said to me, "The weather is so hot and the flies are so bad. Will you give me a sheet to put over the corpse?" In reply, I gave him permission to get anything he needed from the house. Dickinson Gorsuch is lying in the fence corner, and I believe he is dying. Give me something for him to drink, said Powell, who seemed to be acting the part of Good Samaritan. Gorsuch's body was taken to Christiana for a coroner's inquest, and Klein attended the inquest, but no one wanted to hear his account, so no testimony was taken. So that's kind of where we stand.
Wait, so did the younger Gorsuch, did he die?
No. So Edward Gorsuch
thought he was dying.
Yes. So Edward Gorsuch got shot a whole bunch of times and chopped in the head with corn cutters and is dead. Dickinson Gorsuch got shot with a shotgun multiple times.
Okay, he was the guy that they pulled 70.
They pulled 70 shot out of him. Yeah. Joshua Gorsuch, the nephew, got clubbed to the point where he suffered from headaches for years to come. Klein seemed like he was mostly uninjured. And the two neighbors who helped just ran away.
Did he just hide behind the horse? Was he one of those guys?
So it'll come up more in the trial what Klein did. It seems like Klein, at the moment of the shooting started, Klein ran away and hid.
Okay.
He will deny that like for the rest of his life, but it seems like he probably just ran away and hid.
Okay.
The neighbors who were helping out, the Nathan Nelson and I forget the other guy's name, they just ran away. That was Parker had commented on how he chased Nelson away.
Right.
He ran after him and couldn't catch him.
There was that's the guy they tried to shoot, but he was too far away.
Yeah. So, I think Joshua Gorsuch, the one with the headaches, he was the one that everybody kicked and stomped on when they walked past until blood oozed out his ears.
Okay.
So the three Gorsuch men were the ones that got it the worst. Edward is dead. Dickinson got shot with a bunch of like buckshot, and Gorsuch got his head stomped on until blood came out of his ears and had headaches for years to come.
Okay.
So yeah, they're not doing great. Klein hid. Yeah. He will always deny that for the rest of his life, but it seems like he just hid. So like I said, Gorsuch's body was taken for a coroner's inquest. Nobody wanted to hear what Klein had to say. According to William Parker, Gorsuch was alive after the shooting stopped, but the women in the group put an end to him with their corn cutters.
Okay.
He wrote, his slave struck him the first and second blows. Then 3 or 4 of us sprang upon him, and he became helpless. Left him to pursue others. The women put an end to him. So maybe that's what happened. Papers at the time reported that the corpse was mutilated heavily, and some accounts included saying that his penis was cut off.
Oh.
The extent of the mutilation was not fully recorded, but the governor of Maryland did talk about this mutilation in his annual address to the state legislature. Like, got up and talked about,
gave a little State of the Union, state address, and
gave a little State of the Union talking about how Gorsuch's penis was cut off. Which honestly, like, it seemed crazy to me, like, the first time I read that like a governor would get up in front of the state assembly and like spread unfounded rumors about mutilation, to whip up his supporters in like a racist frenzy.
Doesn't seem that crazy to me.
No, I could honestly see Donald Trump doing a very similar, like saying the same thing.
I was going to say, like, I don't know, like Greg Abbott is probably doing that right now.
Yeah. So yeah, no, our elected officials have never been like tactful. With all this, only 2 of the rioters required medical attention. One received a ball in the hand near the wrist, but it had only entered the skin and he was able to push it out with his thumb.
Oh, all right.
Another received a ball in a fleshy part of his thigh, which had to be extracted by a surgeon, but neither were sick or like permanently injured by their wounds. Cool. It was relatively minor. Sarah Powell and the other local Quaker women packed suitcases full of food and gave disguises to Parker and the other men in the house, and they began their escape north to Canada.
See, again, it never fails to surprise me how bad guns used to be.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even the guy that died didn't die from the gunshot wounds. He died because they killed him with farm implements.
Yeah, he got shot he couldn't go anywhere because of the gunshot wounds.
Yeah, they incapacitated him with many gunshot wounds.
Yeah.
But, and like, I mean, he had his 2 revolvers. Like, I'm not saying he would have won. Like, he was outnumbered and like outgunned. But like, if you like open up into a crowd of densely packed people with 2 revolvers and you only slightly injure 2 of the people, like I don't know. I'm just, it's like the same circumstance with modern firearms. I feel like a lot more people would have been like killed or severely injured.
Well, and that's the thing that you keep saying. Like, we saw that a bunch of times in the William Parker episode, where when people shot at him, it just seemed to make him mad.
Yeah, like
it wasn't like I don't know. He wasn't.
Well, he had that whole line where he's like, "I've seen pistols before."
Yeah,
he's like, "Yeah, they're not. They don't impress me."
Yeah, well, it's because like when they opened fire on Parker and his group, they didn't respond by running away. They charged at them and then just beat them with their guns. They used their guns as clubs.
Yeah.
And beat them to the point where their guns were like no longer usable as guns. Yeah. But yeah, they it was so doomed to failure from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it does, like, I understand why some people think that it was a setup, because, like, it does seem like they just walked into an ambush.
Yeah. Well, William Parker, like, as we've discussed before, like, William Parker is not the kind of guy who's ever going to back down from a fight. He is, and he's good at it. His house is in like a perfect like defensible position. They had warnings that these guys were coming because of this network of abolitionist spies, and and Samuel Williams putting himself at risk to come out and warn them.
He was a open train spy.
Yeah. And Gorsuch and Klein, like, to the end, operated on this idea that they could just read their legal papers, and once the group knew that the law was on their side, they would just turn themselves in and willingly return to slavery.
Yeah, well, and Parker, he articulated it well, but it's like, it's like an important idea, like, I don't know, since the Enlightenment, I guess, like the idea that, like, like the law isn't some, like, divinely mandated, like, set of rules. Like, it's it's an agreement, like, between people. Like the law is supposed to serve people in some degree,
right?
And like the idea that like if the law does not protect you, then you are not morally beholden to abide by the law. Like, that's like, yeah, that's like an important and powerful idea in, like, revolts and uprisings, like, all over the place. Like,
yes.
And it's just interesting to see how, Parker's, like, fully embodying that ideal. He's like, look, the law doesn't give a shit about me. Like, like, clearly you have these papers, like these legal papers saying that, like, I do not hold, like, the same, like, moral weight as like a sentient being that, like, you do. And then, like, there's the other dudes that are like, it just shows the difference in perspective that you come to when, like, depending on, like, whether or not, like, you live a life with, like, the law on your side. Because, like, Gorsuch, like, he comes from the world where, like, the laws serve him.
Yeah.
So he has respect for the law, and he just assumes that everyone must have respect for the law.
Right.
But yeah, Parker doesn't give a shit about the law because the law doesn't give a shit about him.
Yeah. And it's interesting where, like, Parker has these positive relationships with the white people around, with his white neighbors. Like, he clearly got along with the pals.
Yeah.
He, it'll come up more when we talk about the trial that follows, that, he had a good relationship with Castor Hanway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he specifically told them, and, when Sarah Powell was asking him not to fight, he specifically said, I don't want the whites to fight. Like, you have the law on your side. You have the law to worry about. Like, you stay out of this. This is our fight, because this doesn't, the law doesn't apply to us.
Right.
The law doesn't
protect. The society has chosen to exclude us. And as such, we exist outside the law.
Yeah. But he respected that that the white people did not exist outside the law. And he, told them to stay out of it. He was an interesting man. He was clearly had, like, thought deeply about these issues, and thought deeply about what it meant to be free.
Mm-hmm.
And fascinating guy. And we'll get to find out more about him in the next episode. We'll talk about his escape to Canada and some cool interactions he has with Frederick Douglass. And then we'll get into the trial. Cool. And the largest treason trial in American history. It still blows my mind that that's treason.
Yeah.
That not helping
kidnap a dude.
Yeah.
Is treason. Against the U.S. government.
Yes.
It is crazy, like, some of the laws that, like, the southern states managed to get passed.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they get all butthurt and acts like the law wasn't on their side.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the law was more on your side than anyone else. Yeah. It's crazy. So yeah, next time we'll discuss their flight to the north and how Parker and the three men get away, and then how a bunch of other people don't get away and what happens to them as a result.
Well, that was an action-packed one. That was exciting.
That was the Riot.
All right.
So thank you for listening, everybody. Goodbye.